Hi, thanks for stopping by our channel today. I'm Pete, and today we're going to be doing something a little different. We're going to start off in one of our raised beds. One of the reasons why I love working in the soil is it's a good way to stay connected with the earth. Most people that are into farming, they find their most precious moments, when working in the soil. And that's one of the reasons why we're going back to our roots and starting our own farm. So today we're just going to be weeding out one of our raised beds. It's early January right now, and we have a sunny day. It's been raining quite a bit. It's been very cold, but today it's probably going to be in the 60s, which is gorgeous. And no rain. We haven't had rain in a couple of days, so we can actually get out here and work it. The soil's pretty damp, but and everything's starting to pop up, all these weeds. So we're going to get these out. Last year in this bed we had cucumber, zucchini, we had pole beans, carrots, and I forget what we had here, but we've had this bed gets the most sun, so we try to plant our crops that need the most sun. So this one is the one I like to start off with because, like I said, it's been in the sun. It's starting to dry out. Some of the other ones I'll get back to, once the sun starts getting on those. We usually start all of our plants indoors, and it's worked out for the last 4 or 5 years that we've been doing it. And we usually we're in zone 9, so we start indoors the 3rd week of February, and things usually go in the ground mid to late March, which is nice because on some of these crops, like I said, we had a bunch of things in here last year, and we can actually have a couple of crops. You can have first and second growing. The zucchinis do really well, and the cucumbers also. The carrots didn't turn out very well, but I think that was just because of the soil amendments that I didn't choose. The soil amendments I gave it weren't exactly what it wanted. Oh, I remember what we had in here. We had some peppers, some sweet peppers, and they turned out really well too. Late summer, zone 9, we don't get much rain throughout the summer, so everything that we grow has to be irrigated. And just working in the soil, like I said, you kind of get in tune with the earth and what it needs. We irrigate. We try not to use tap water because all the things that are in it that aren't good for plants, but we're able to get some agricultural water, pump it into one of those big square 275 gallon buckets, and then bring that out, irrigate with that. So we have, behind the camera, we've got a bunch of apricot trees. We've got orange and lemon trees over here, as well as another apricot. And then we've actually been doing, I saw on YouTube somebody did potatoes in a bucket, in a 5-gallon bucket. And so we tried that last year, and boy, it works really well. We grow red potatoes, and they were, several of them were as big as a softball. So, you know, the late season ones aren't very big, but the early season crop they were great. So one thing we're going to be working on, obviously this soil will need some new amendments for the year. It compacts over the winter quite a bit. And so we'll come in and with a rototiller till up this and the other beds, and we'll put in our soil amendments. But you know, before really getting started with that, we're going to need to sit down. I think this weekend we're going to be setting out a plan of what we're going to be growing, and then look at the soil nutrient requirements for those and buy the according soil amendments. And then one thing that I like to use, we have a friend who has chickens, and we found that it's kind of a universal fertilizer is the chicken manure. So we'll probably use that as well as some other things. So before I was able to get out of here, this is Scooby, and the black and white one's Mama. They're both rescues. We have a third rescue that's running around somewhere. Mama here is our most recent addition. Like I said, we live on a county road, and somebody abandoned Mama by our house. So we found out who it was and made sure they didn't want her back, and she has turned out to be just the sweetest little dog. Anyway, I don't normally let them in here, but I've got the gate open, so I figured I would introduce you to Scooby and Mama. So we got the dogs out of the bed and did a final rake on it and got it pretty level. One thing that I like to do early in the season is to get what my wife calls unauthorized growth. Get out here and get the weeds picked before they really start to get established with a root system. So we've got that done. The dogs are out, I think, barking at a squirrel. They treed a squirrel this morning, and they just know it's still up there. So we're going to get the rest of the beds all cleaned up. We grow a lot of our crops vertically rather than horizontally. We did our zucchinis and our cucumbers last year vertically in big tomato cages, and they worked out fantastic. So getting those all cleaned up and put together, and throw away the bad ones and make a shopping list what we need for this year. We got the raised beds all cleaned out, and everything's ready for our soil amendments. What we're going to work on right now is getting our potatoes in our potato pots. We grew our potatoes this way last year, and they turned out fantastic. We had 2 growings, and we had a first harvest and second harvest. The first harvest, we had really good sized potatoes and lots of potatoes. Our second growing that went into late into the fall didn't turn out very well. We had a lot of potatoes, but they were all kind of small, but they were still potatoes, so they still tasted good. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go up on our bench, and we're going to prep the potatoes. So I have my potatoes cut up. I bought these. I always buy these from the same grower. They're red seed potatoes. And then these I'm just trying this year. These are just regular Idaho potatoes, but they're supposed to be non-GMO. A lot of times, if you buy potatoes at the store, many times they'll grow plants, but they won't reproduce potatoes. And if they do, they come out very small. So these aren't quite seed potatoes, but they're non-GMO. So I'm hoping we're just giving this a try. That's why I'm only doing a few. Today's February 10th. So this is, and I'm in zone 9. So this is our first crop that we're going to get in the ground. And I like to cut them in half. When you cut them, make sure that there are eyes on each piece. It's easy to tell once they start to sprout. You want to make sure that there's an eye on each piece, because if you have a piece that's completely smooth, it may not grow. And I like to cut them in half, and that way you get them in the ground. But before planting them, I let these seal over, they heal themselves. And that way, when you put them in the ground, if you put them in the ground this way, they can rot. I have done it that way and it hasn't rotted, but I've also done it where it did rot. So before planting these, when you do your cuttings, just leave them sit for 4, 5, 6 hours, and they'll heal over. And then you can put them in the ground. So I'm just going to let these sit for a while. And let's see, that one's sitting on the ground, so we want to make sure the air gets to it. And we're going to let those sit and heal over. So now that we've let our potatoes scab over, we're going to go ahead and plant these. And what we did last year, I put 2 potatoes, or 4 halves, in each bucket. I'm going to put all the red potatoes in the yellow buckets, and these Idaho potatoes I'm going to put in these other buckets just to try out. So when we plant them, I like to plant the eyes or the growth facing up, and I'll put them down about 4 inches into the soil. And we just put them, there's 4 halves, and just space them evenly around in the bucket. As potatoes grow, the greens grow up, and they're kind of like tomatoes in that as the greens grow up, you can fill in more soil and bury the greens, and you'll get more roots off of them. So I'm planting these about 4 or 5 inches down. And then as the greens come up, I will fill in the soil and bring the soil level up, and that will give more area for potatoes to grow. So now we've got all our potatoes planted. Hopefully we will have a good first harvest this year. And like I'd said, these Idaho potatoes, I think these are just going to be a trial run. Technically, they weren't seed potatoes, so I'm not hoping too much for them, but it's kind of an experiment. Today's February 10th, so I'll let you know as time goes how things are growing, and hopefully, what is it, 90 to 110 days or so, hopefully we'll have some potatoes. So this afternoon we're going to work on the front end on the tractor. So as soon as I get cleaned up here, we're going to go over to the shop and get started on that. So we've got our front mount back from the machine shop. They were able to press this pin out, and we were able to get the wishbone apart. The bushing that was in the wishbone was completely worn out. We've got a brand new bushing that's going to get pressed into the wishbone. That wishbone's in the paint booth, so we're getting that done. Then we'll go ahead and press this in. As far as this mount goes, they kind of had some problems doing that. They kind of bent it up pretty good. They bent one of the sides, and if you remember, this side was already bent. So with doing all of this, I was able to kind of straighten that. But what happened was when they pressed the old pin out, it came off with this piece. And this piece is normally part of this. There's 3 big welds that hold this and this together. So we're going to have to re-weld that. And just as I had thought, with this pin, I don't know if you can see, but it's worn very badly and there's a groove in it. You can kind of see it there. And when pushing it out, that's what was really hanging up. So with their 60-ton press, they were able to get this apart, but they kind of boogered this thing up. So I got the torch out, we heated this up, and the anvil, and got this flat, and we heated this up and was able to metal finish that back together. But in doing so, these bores kind of got out around and twisted. And so what I've done is I've taken this half round file and this rat tail file and really worked at each one of these bores individually to make sure that our new pin would go through. And it does. The key now is to get all of them to line up. And so I was able to do that too. So we've got our pin, and we line that up, and we get that lined up with the back. Now it's really important that all 3 of these line up. So we've got that. It's taken a couple hours of file work, but we were able to get this all buttoned up. Now the bolt that we have that goes in here is a 1/2 by 20. And I ran a tap through this and chased the threads to make sure that all the threads were good. So what we'll do is we'll run this bolt down here. And now that will hold everything in perfect alignment. What I'll do is I'm going to weld all around the outside with our MIG welder and weld this back in. But I want to make sure I do that with the pin in there, because if I do that without the pin, all of these bores, this, and this, can twist. So what we'll do is we'll weld this, and we want to make sure that this thing heats up and cools down as an assembly. So once I get this welded, I'll probably set it on the bench overnight and let it completely cool down before pulling this pin out. So the bushing will go in the wishbone, and that will go on there. Now with this, with the old parts I got back from the machine shop, there are 2 big washers right there, and they go in the back. And this one big spacer goes in the front. So when you take one of these apart, you want to make sure that you look at how many washers. You want to make sure you get all the spacing correct. If there's too much play in this, that wishbone can move around and kill this new bushing. So we want to make sure that we have that in good and tight. It is kind of a wide bushing, but even at that, over the years, it just kind of wobbles around, and that's kind of what caused the damage to this old pin. So yeah, let's get this welded up and finish cleaning it, and then we can sand it and clean it up and get that in the paint booth. Let's get this tacked in. I'm going to tack it, and then I'm going to go back and weld it. Wire speeds up a little too high here. Turn it down. Okay. A little too far down. Back up. Yep. All right, we'll let this sit for just a little bit. I don't want to put too much heat in this thing. So that was quite a bit of heat. So we'll let that cool down, and then we'll come back and finish these two sides, and then clean it up and see what we got. We've got the front mount all welded up now, and I kind of spent some time with these grinders cleaning it, but it's still pretty warm, so I'm going to let it sit overnight, and in the morning we'll pull the pin out and see, make sure that everything's still aligned, make sure that the alignment hasn't changed. And then we might need to do a little bit of touch up with the files to get it, that pin to slide in and out nicely. It's not really, once we have it together, it's not really going to come apart, but we still want to be able to take it apart if we need to. and not have it be something we beat in and then never be able to pull it out. Also, we will get the bushing put in the wishbone, and then once that's done, we'll get this, we'll also get this painted, and hopefully we can reassemble the wishbone with the mount. We got our parts painted. I think they turned out pretty nice. Because this is on the bottom of the tractor, I believe we put 5 coats of paint on it, and it turned out pretty good. I just don't, over time, I don't want it to scratch. So what we're going to do, our pin fits in here. It's kind of tight just because of the paint that we put in. So what I'm going to do is just, with this half round file, I'm going to go around and kind of clean up the points that the bushing, or excuse me, that the pin rides on. Shouldn't take too much, just kind of cleaning up some of the high spots. There we go. Yeah, just like that. And then another thing I want to do, anytime I have something powder coated or painted, I always like to clean the bores and then clean the threads. So we're just going to use, this is a 1/2 by 20, which was the original bolt that was in here. And if you remember, this is that bolt that had broken off. So we've got a new bolt to go in there. Yeah, just a little bit of paint material to remove. Anytime you're dealing with a bore that is a tight fit and a bolt to go in threads, I always like cleaning them just so that it doesn't gum up and just make problems for you down the road. Oh yeah, there we go. And then I put the bushing in here, and I forgot to film that part. But all I did was I used the new pin. I put the bushing on here and then set it on here. And then with a soft mallet, I just drove this in. And that took care of the bushing. So on the inside of the bushing, there's like an X cut into it to retain some grease. So when we do our final assembly on this, we'll put some grease in here, and then that will hold some of the grease in that little relief that's been cut in here. But yeah, I think it's coming along. I've got those washers are in the paint booth from yesterday, so I'm going to get those, and we should be able to put this back together. Now, one thing that I found also when working on I painted the engine. When I was working on that, I found that when I operated the clutch pedal is disengaging way at the bottom. It's got a lot of movement before you get any kind of pressure. So, the key was I wanted to get this thing running so I could evaluate it. But now that we're at this point, I think it would be kind of foolish not to just put a clutch in it. So we're going to get this back together, but I don't think we're going to put this on the tractor right away. We're going to, probably in our next video, we're going to pull the motor off of the transmission and replace the clutch. I ordered a clutch, and it should be here in a day or so, a couple of days. So that'll probably be in our next video. We've got our spacers out of the paint booth, so I think they are ready to go. So what I'm going to do before we assemble this, I'm going to use some of this moly grease. I like using this stuff because it has good retention. It sticks really well. Plus, it doesn't really get contaminated too easily, where other greases are very, very sticky. They almost attract dirt and stuff. All right, so I want to make sure I get a lot of it in that little recessed X that's cut in there. All right. Get that like that. Now, if you remember, we had 2 washers here. So we're going to put those in the back. And then we've got our spacer that goes in the front. So we're just going to put this right there on top of those 2 spacers. Then we're going to take our thick spacer and put that in the front. We're just going to feed this down through the whole thing, just like that. There we go. Whoop. And it feels like it moves nicely. There's no binding or anything. I'll just get that started right there, and I just dropped my socket down, so and there we go. Now we have our mount. With our wishbone all put back together. So that will be ready to go back on the front of the engine after we pull the motor for the clutch. Now there are some other threads in here, and I'm not really sure what they go to. Probably an attachment that bolts on to the front. So I ran a thread chaser in there too and just kind of cleaned up the threads. That was a pretty successful day, I would say. It was a long day. We got all of the raised beds cleaned out. Here in a week or so, we're going to get all the soil amendments and extra soil added back into the raised beds and get those ready. Next week also, we're going to get the seedlings going in our little grow room, and we'll cover that on our next video. But it's getting to be that time of the year. It's an exciting time when things are going in motion to start growing. The doldrums of the winter are gone. Yay. We got the front end together on this. We got the potatoes all planted. One thing I didn't mention, but when you plant them, make sure you give them a good drink. So they're in place and ready for the sun. Hopefully in a couple of months, we'll have some potatoes. So I do appreciate you guys. I know that we're up to almost 80 subscribers. That's fantastic. I had no idea that this was going to take off, but I really do appreciate your time and, stopping by. If this was interesting, please give me a like on the video. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. It would greatly help us grow the channel as we build our small farm. On the next video, like I said, we're going to do a couple of things, but the main thing is we're going to be working on the clutch on the engine. So I'm going to get my son and my nephew over here. We'll get the motor pulled off, replace the clutch, get the engine placed back in, put back in place, and then we'll get the front end back together and put some tires on it and get it back on the ground. And then the next thing I want to do after that is to start and run the engine. I appreciate you stopping by, and I'll catch you on the next one.